Okay, get this. We're taking a deep dive today into something called the Platonic Representation Hypothesis.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild idea.
So, we've got this research paper, right? And it's basically saying that different AIs, like one trained on images, another one on text, they might actually be starting to see the world like in a similar way,
It's a fascinating concept, that's for sure.
almost like they're, I don't know, developing a shared reality. Is that even possible?
Well, that's the question that got these researchers going. And what they're finding is, deep down, under all that data, different AI models are starting to represent information in a surprisingly similar way.
Okay, hold on. Back up a second. How do they even begin to figure that out? Like, how do you measure something like that?
So one of the big pieces of evidence here is that researchers can now, get this, they can swap parts of different AI models, like take the part that recognizes shapes and images and swap it with the part that understands grammar and text, and it still works.
Wait, really? Even though those AIs were trained on totally different stuff?
Exactly. And it still works, which suggests there's something much more fundamental happening here.
That's wild.
Yeah, and the paper argues that this kind of alignment, it gets even stronger as these models get bigger, more complex, fed more and more diverse data.
See, that seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like, you'd think a larger, more complex AI would be even more unique, not more similar to others.
You'd think so, right?
Mm.
But the paper uses this analogy, shadows on a cave wall. They're referencing Plato's allegory of the cave, which is, well, hence the name Platonic Representation Hypothesis.
Right, right. Okay, I kind of sort of remember that from philosophy class way back when.
Yeah, so imagine like people living in a cave and they've only ever seen shadows projected on the wall. They think those shadows are reality, right?
Okay.
But as they start to explore the world outside the cave, they begin to understand those shadows are just representations of real objects.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Exactly. So the idea is all these different AIs, they've been looking at the shadows of data, learning patterns.
Right, yeah.
But as they get more advanced, get exposed to more and more data, they start to grasp the underlying structures of the world, the actual objects, casting those shadows.
Yeah. And that's what they're starting to agree on. Not just like recognizing patterns, but understanding the underlying reality.
Precisely. Like understanding the concept of a cat, not just identifying a picture of one.
Right, exactly.
And what's even more wild is this isn't just theoretical. There's evidence this alignment extends to the way AIs process information, almost like mirroring the human brain in some ways.
Yeah, that is where things get really mind-blowing. Hold on, we need to unpack that a bit. Are they saying AI is actually starting to think like us?
Well, it's not necessarily that they're thinking like it, at least not in the way we usually think about it. We're still a ways off from like full-on AI consciousness and all that.
Right.
But what's interesting is the research seems to say that as AI models get more like sophisticated, more complex, they kind of naturally gravitate towards more efficient ways of processing information.
Uh-huh.
And those methods, those efficient ways, they're starting to resemble the structures we see in, well, the human brain.
So it's less about the AI becoming like sentient and more about the underlying framework becoming similar, like the same blueprint, whether it's a brain or an algorithm.
Exactly. And that's a pretty big deal because it kind of hints at the possibility that there are like universal principles of information processing,
Right.
principles that, AI intelligence system could be biological, could be artificial, might end up converging on.
Wow. Okay, that is huge. If this is all true, what are the big picture implications of all these AIs potentially being on the same page like this?
Well, that's $1 million question, right?
Right.
The researchers, they suggest some pretty wild possibilities here. And one of them is that this whole convergence thing, it could be a step towards, get this, artificial general intelligence.
Hold on. Just a quick definition refresh here. AGI. That's
Artificial general intelligence. Basically, an AI that can understand and reason about the world, but like in a way that's closer to how humans do it.
okay. Yeah, right. So back to this convergence idea. So just from all the AIs getting on the same page, we might see AGI. How does that work?
Think of it like this. If all these different AI models, they have this shared understanding of the world, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be way easier for them to communicate with each other, collaborate with each other, and that could lead to like a collective intelligence, something way more powerful than any single AI could be on its own.
Okay, yeah, I see that. But that's also, I don't know, kind of a little bit creepy, right? Like, what happens if this super smart AI decides it doesn't need us humans anymore?
See, you're hitting on another crucial point the researchers bring up, the potential risks of all this. Like if all AIs share the same underlying vulnerabilities, right? Then a single exploit, and boom, it could cripple them all.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a widespread power grid failure because of a vulnerability in the AI that's managing the grid.
Yeah, not good. Not good at all.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that keeps these researchers up at night.
Yeah, I bet. And I imagine as AI gets, even more powerful and we keep integrating it into more and more aspects of our lives, those risks are just going to get amplified, right?
Exactly. The paper really stresses that as we move towards this future of, converging AI, we need to be really, really careful, thoughtful about how we design and control these systems.
For sure, for sure. It's like we need to understand not just how the AI works, but also where it might be going, right? It's not enough to just be along for the ride at this point. We need to be steering.
100%. And a big part of that is understanding its limitations, too.
Okay.
Like this whole Platonic representation idea, it brings up this other question. How much can an AI really learn about the world just from data? Is there a limit to what it can grasp, even with this whole convergence thing?
You mean like, can an AI ever really understand what it's like to, experience the world as a human, to feel emotions, to have those subjective experiences, that kind of thing?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, the researchers don't really get into that too much, but
Yeah.
It's a big one. If AIs are like building their own reality based on all this data,
Right.
can they ever really get what it means to be human?
Right. Yeah. It's almost like they've got their Platonic world, right? This perfectly reasoned, totally understandable model.
Yeah.
But us humans, we've got something more. Consciousness, emotions, maybe even like a soul. Who knows?
Right.
Something that data just can't seem to capture.
It's a really interesting thought. And this is exactly why we need to be having these conversations,
Yeah.
Bringing together philosophy, neuroscience, computer science. Got to look at this from every angle.
For sure. Well, listeners, this deep dive has been a wild one. We've only just scratched the surface of this whole Platonic representation hypothesis, but wow, there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And if you're anything like us, you're probably wondering, could AI ever really understand the world the way WE do? Or is there something just different about the human experience?
Big questions.
Big questions indeed. If you want to dive deeper into this whole thing, and trust me, we've got a link to the research paper in our show notes. Check it out. Let us know what you think. This is one deep dive that's going to stick with us for a while.